Writing is my favorite thing to do.
Have you heard about the Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention? They'll have writing workshops, writing classes, and more. June 16th through 18th, 2017 at the Renaissance Airport Hotel in St. Louis, Missouri.
Cool! Where can I sign up?
Go right now to www.stlwritersguild.org and click on GatewayCon.
www.stlwritersguild.org and click on GatewayCon?
That's right. See you there.
Right Pack Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media, for writers, by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas. Yes, I have my voice back. Kathleen did not kill me.
I might have resurrected him, though.
A little necromancy there, but anyway. Currently working on a space western in our series, and more on that later. Also, too, you will hear later. Actually, I take it back. You have already heard the advertisement for GatewayCon because I put it in front of this episode. So come to GatewayCon in St. Louis, June 16th through 18th. Readers Convention, Writers Conference. And with me today is my lovely co-host.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Kayembe. I write romance under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and under my own name. My story, You Will Always Have Family, a triptych, is out at Nightmare Magazine on March 15th. So if you're listening after that, go check it out. And if you're listening before then, buy the issue so you can read it first.
And actually, this is appearing the first Sunday of April, so.
Oh, well, go check out my story. It's great.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My book is available
Yay!
on Amazon.com and at Main Street Books in St. Charles. If you live local, buy local. If you don't, hit me up. It's Threadcaster. Thread like string, caster like magic. It's the Oregon Trail through Oz.
That's
like
an interesting
that
comment.
tagline.
There you go.
That's-
And people die of dysentery. No.
I have a lot of stuff in my book.
Oh, goodness.
But not dysentery.
The more is burning than just the way out.
There we go.
Someone becomes a river, and there's a kid named Ford.
And on that note, Brad.
Yes, Brad R. Cook, author of Steampunk and Other Such Fun Things, some nonfiction as well. You can find it all at bradarcook.com. You can also find me at thewriterslens.com and otherplaces.com.
Otherplaces.com.
Other places that are .com.
Yeah, don't search the otherplaces.com. You don't know what's at the other end of that.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
humor already.
Yay! Alright, sorry.
And also, my lovely wife.
I'm Melanie Lucas. I haven't written much lately, but I am
You're
writing.
getting to it.
Yes, slowly. Sci-fi, fantasy, and nonfiction. And what I've been writing mostly is very boring nonfiction that other people are reading, but no, my name isn't on it because it's called Editing Other People's Consent Documents.
The life of the IRB.
Yeah. What?
I said consent is sexy.
Yeah.
I'm the only erotica writer here, okay? I have to say something because Lee is missing.
Yeah, no, we miss Lee. We can't wait till she gets able to come back. But in the meantime, we still have our lovely new friend. Yeah, I'll give her a hug.
My name is Chanel Etienne. I write stuff. Let's see. Sci-fi, fantasy. I haven't quite broken into erotica yet, but I'm going to give you a run for your money, lady.
Oh, I'm so excited! Not sexually, but I could be.
Depends on how well you write your erotica.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was very titillating. Anyway.
In so many ways.
I'm sorry, but Fedora, you can follow.
Follow that one.
I'm Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. On the first Saturday in May, I'm going to be at St. Louis Writers Guild telling you all about poisons you personally know, but
Yay!
probably don't know that you know. So I'm going to get you up close and personal with something that could change your life.
Or maybe
Or someone
even bring it to a
else's.
close.
Oh, yeah.
Or someone else's.
Change someone else's life permanently.
And bringing up the end of the circle.
I am George Soroy. I write science fiction for the young adult reader. My sci-fi YA novel Excelsior is currently in editing for a relaunch through Aloris Publishing, which will be out in the world once again on May 1st. The first of 2 sequels, Ever Upward, Part 2 of the Excelsior Journey, will also be out June 1st of this year. The 5-part serial from Parts Unknown will be out at a later date, at a date to be determined. And I'm also the proud vice president of the Missouri Writers Guild, and I look forward to seeing you all at the Missouri Writers Guild Conference in Columbia, Missouri, May 5th through the 7th at the Holiday Inn Executive Center.
Question: when
Yes.
do you sleep?
Well, actually, I haven't, done too much writing lately, so I've been sleeping a little bit more so than usual.
So you do it like grizzly bear style, or you just do it all at once?
That
and then
sounds
let
Basically,
it-
yeah. Now I'm doing my sleeping, so but now that all of that's done, and also I am currently in production of narrating the audiobook for Debbie Mamber Kupfer's sequel to Pause, Argentum. So that will be out at a later date as well.
Excellent.
Hooray.
So today, actually, one thing I'm going to add, no, you cannot find my website right now because I have taken it down. I'm doing a complete revamp. Actually, technically, you could find it. You just have to add to it in order to actually really find it. But hopefully by the time this airs, my voice demo will be up. So if not, it'll be very shortly thereafter.
Hooray.
And on that note, today we're going to have a little fun. As you know, with the first week of our first Sunday of the month, we like to celebrate somebody's birthday. Well, today we can't celebrate a greater writers than the humorist, the writer, the lecturer, the publisher, and the entrepreneur, Samuel Clemens, a.k.a.
Mark Twain. My favorite writer.
And he was born November 30th, 1835, died April 21, 1910. So in a way, this is a wake, but
I was
yes,
gonna say this is a wake, not a happy birthday.
not a
Yeah,
happy
we're
birthday.
not
It is a
celebrating a
wake.
birthday, we're celebrating a death day.
Now it seems really weird to have humor.
No, he should
No,
be
but this is what he would have wanted.
The best humor is dark. My opinion only.
Yeah, and I think he said he came in with Haley's comment and he left with Haley's comment.
Yes.
Yep.
Something like that. So,
Oh, it brought him into this world and it took him right back out of it.
It did reappear the day after he died, I believe. So yeah.
there we go.
He just got there early because you know how planes are.
So it really
To
is
us
a
that
spaceship.
Twain is born.
Oh God! Reference to that horrible cult. Yes. So, what does anybody in here find writing humor easy? Let me just start that off.
I find it fun to read. Does that count?
It's fun to read. How easy is it to write?
It's difficult to write.
Ugh.
Well, I think there's a
Crickets.
difference in intentional funny and unintentional funny.
True.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
that's
is really easy to write unintentional funny. It is very difficult to write intentional funny.
Now the trick is figuring out when you should leave in the unintentional funny.
Sometimes it's easy to write intentional funny about unintentional funny. I won't take all of our time up complaining about vampires again, but I can stop a show talking about vampires because it's so much fun to
It's the
tease
best
it.
name ever.
There are a lot of actual techniques that a writer can use, though, to create humor. And I thought perhaps I would toss out a few lines from Phyllis Diller, Here, There, and Yon, and see if you can identify the technique and show people how it works. Does that sound like something reasonable to do?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, this is from Driving with Dan Weiss in today's Post-Dispatch newspaper. And he always writes about automobiles. And he writes in a very humorous way. So even though I'm not planning to buy a new truck, I'm going to read his article just because it's that much fun. Well, here's his first line of today's. Toyota's newest sedan has had more names than a small town phone book. Why is that funny, folks?
Because it was unexpected.
Yes. There's unexpectedness to it. There is a easy correlation in the mind to it.
But beyond that, more names than Small Town Phone Book.
That's not a whole
It's
lot
had
of
maybe
names.
4 or 5 different names.
Right.
But even in a small town phone book, aren't you going to have hundreds?
Not necessarily.
Well, I think you
Are
are.
you saying that it also has exaggeration? Then?
Exactly.
Exaggeration.
That is one of the key means of creating humor is to use exaggeration.
Oh.
And, of course, the unexpected always.
Mhm.
And hyperbole.
Yes.
Which is
That's,
exaggeration.
yes, that's exaggeration.
In
Being
my defense, I've
specific.
driven through an Illinois town that had 36 people. So,
Well, still, that would be more than half a dozen.
well, this is true.
No, I've driven through towns that
Okay.
it
Yeah,
was.
now
I
You're
started.
listening to hee-haw, I think.
Is this
Oh,
not about the
run.
destruction of the
Yeah.
American
Yes.
small town?
This is about Mark Twain.
I
make
will.
it a satire.
I will say that being a lifelong fan of film, one thing that I will notice is that there is nothing that will slow time down more than a bad comedy.
Oh, yeah.
There is, like this, a typical comedy will run about 90 minutes, but if it's bad, if it's just painful to watch, but yet for some reason you find yourself wanting to know how this story ends, then it will be Godfather 2 length. That's just how it will feel. But yeah, that's the one thing that always makes me kind of afraid to try my own hand at writing comedy, and that's why I have like a lot of respect for stand-up comedians, the ones who actually get up on the stage and just let it all out in a way that I feel like I never could. Like they go up there like almost like an exposed nerve.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's bad, then wow, just an 8-minute set will seem like forever.
Very much so.
Well, and out of coincidence, I actually just saw a stand-up routine last night over at the Funny Bone at Westport, and there were 3, of course, comedians. They opened with the host, then they had the opening act, and then they had the feature, and then they had the main guy, the headliner. And I won't mention any names since we're going to be comparing and contrasting different kinds of like humor or whatever. A big point that they made, that they kept making, because a couple of them really like to do self-referential humor,
Right.
was that your audience has a lot to do with comedy. And
Yeah.
the main guy, he spent a lot of his set playing with the audience in that play. He was playing with the audience expectations. Like, he would appeal to the more intelligent group with a more complex joke, and then take the fact that the drunker ones weren't catching on to spin into another joke about the fact that they didn't catch on to the previous joke. And of course, some people thought that was funny, and other people did not think that was funny, and then he would make that into a joke. And it was a little bit of a lesson in sort of stand-up comedy strategy. At the same time, he was giving us
That is a very good
jokes.
strategy. Yeah, I feel like that's a great way to do it.
Are you dovetail or change?
Oh, no, I'll change. You go ahead, Brian.
I was just gonna say that actually that's when I do write humor. This is where I go for my humor, is to the stand-up the stand-up comedians, and the reason is because there's such variety that you can use, from the old style of like Bob Hope or Joan Rivers or Carson, who had the one-line zinger kind of line, and they had literally file cabinets full of just zingers that they could lean on and go dig through and write all the time, to George Carlin, who would like rip it out in a political style and just lay it all out and would lay bare society's ills, but do it in a very humorous way that made you think, to somebody like Robin Williams, who was zany and crazy and voices and over the top. By kind of pulling from all these different things, you can see what's going to work best for whatever given moment you're trying to create.
Back on what Jen said, one of the best kinds of humor from stand-up comedians. Try this from Phyllis Diller. Photos of me don't do me justice. They look like me.
One of the singers.
Yes.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not really a zinger against anybody but herself. It's self-deprecating humor, and
Yeah,
that's
but
one of
that's
the
the
very
point.
best kinds
Yeah.
of stand-up comedians can ever use. Is they play the joke on themselves.
I think I was watching an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, and that was something that one of the people who does stand-up comedy for a living mentioned. If you can get the audience to laugh at you, then they will be more willing to laugh with you about other things.
And in our set last night, the feature, he was a little bit more honest with his self-deprecating humor. You know, he would make a joke at his own expense, but it felt like he was telling us the truth about himself and laughing at himself with us. Versus the main stage guy, he would tell a joke about himself and then immediately turn around and do something defensive, like he's being offended by the thing that he said to him. It was way more fun to laugh with the person than it was to laugh at the person. So the main stage guy wanted us to laugh at him because then when we laughed, he would act offended. And I found the first guy more fun than the second guy for that reason and a couple other reasons. But it was it also helped that, again, audience, the opening guy was a local, so he knew what was going on in St. Louis, and he knew what our common complaints were. He had a whole, like, fake rage moment about how flat Emo's Pizza is, and yet how expensive it is. He picks up one of the flyers, and he's like, $48 for this, you guys, and we'll still eat it, because it's got the arch on the box. I'm like, we know you. So it was, but self-referential, self-deprecating humor. There's, it's just that alone. Just making fun of yourself alone is not necessarily always funny. Sometimes it gets sad.
And then I guess I'm after you.
So I remember an open mic where, Jen, you read a blog post about your farting computer.
About Spine Top the farting computer.
Yeah, I remember this one.
I loved it.
You had the whole room in stitches. Like, I have never laughed so hard.
Well, that's because I had visual aids and an auditory edition.
No. For me, it was the way you told the story.
Yes.
You had rhythm and pacing, which are important in fiction, but are just as important with comedy because you had to get the timing right for the punchline of the joke that was, oh my goodness, my computer is still farting.
Yeah.
Why is it still farting? So you're just a naturally pretty funny person, and I know for me, telling storytelling-esque jokes is not as easy. So is there something that you, like, how do you do this thing? Have you noticed things that you do over time that make people laugh more often?
Well, exaggeration, for one. If the joke isn't landing, you just make it punchier. But I like to... My favorite thing is to just kind of take some, Vampires, for instance. My apologies to the author of Vampirates. That book was awful. And every
Vampirates?
Vampirates, yeah, that's the name of the book. It's a series, actually. And literally, as I was reading, every page I turned, I went, I hate this, flip. I hate this too, flip. And it was all because I wanted to, it's like, it can't get any worse than this. But just telling that little story, you pause, I hate this. What you gonna do next? Flip. And that's funny because you're waiting. You gotta horror and comedy have a lot in common. There's a tension, and then you break the tension in an unexpected way, and then it's funny.
Yeah, I would say with comedy, you're nailing one thing. Actually, you've nailed two things. I'm going to point out one, which you've been saying, and then use Mark Twain on the other one.
Oh, good, Mark Twain.
Yay! So, one thing you said, and has been said around the table, and one of the reasons why I'm not good at comedy as far as writing it, is timing. You've got to get the joke, or you've got to get the funny moment perfectly timed, and a lot of times that's used to relieve a serious situation.
Mm-hmm.
The other part is language, the language of a joke. Yes, the exaggeration, but even beyond that, and to quote Mark Twain, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is really a large matter. It's the difference between a lightning bug and the lightning.
Try this one, another one from Phyllis Diller, and see where the humor comes from. I have so little money in my bank account that my scenic checks show a ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't.
And the lesson of that is what? My scenic checks show a ghetto.
Oh, okay.
It went over. It went through.
Oh,
it
okay,
flew
fine.
over Kathleen's head.
I'm sorry. The words, I know they're words, but they're not processing.
And that too is funny.
But the kicker has to be at the end, is what I was getting at. My scenic check show a ghetto. She has so little money. Oh, well. But anyway, the kicker's supposed to be at the end, because then you pause for the laugh, or you wait for the laugh.
So the punchline has to come at the end.
Yeah, the punch has to come at the end, yes.
The one thing about humor that I truly love about it is how it can be used in so many different places, and how it can be used as a wonderful, wonderful tension breaker. One of my favorite moments, I remember sitting in the theater watching this back in the summer of 1991 for one of my all-time favorite comedic moments in a movie that is not comedic, that could not possibly be looked at as comedic, which was Terminator 2 Judgment Day. A lot of funny moments in there and everything, but there's a really great serious moment where you see Sarah Connor on videotape and everything talking about Judgment Day, talking about the blast wave, talking about how humanity ends and everything. Like it's a very serious moment. She's freaking out. She's yelling at Dr. Silverman and everything, just yelling that it happens. She's the tension is building and building and building, and all of a sudden it pauses, and there is silence for about 10-15 seconds, and Sarah is watching herself basically just completely losing it, and just looks at it and just rocking back and forth a little bit, and just looks over at Dr. Silverman and just goes, I feel much better now. Great moment. And that's the beauty of what David was talking about. It's all about timing. And just like what Fedora was talking about, it was at the very end of that moment. It was a great way to just kind of push through and go right into the next beat of that particular scene. And it worked perfectly. And originally, the script had her say a line or two before that, talking about how she wasn't right in the head and everything, and then she went into I feel much better now, and it didn't work. It did not work on the page whatsoever. As soon as Cameron cut that one line and went straight to I feel much better now, all of a sudden that whole moment just came to life.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about unintentionally funny moments in that film, because that one was funny. I was just having a flashback, PTSD style, of high school, reading To Kill a Mockingbird and then seeing the film. And the only part of that film I remember is the tense moment when Scout is running from a creepy guy in her ham costume, and she falls over and her legs stick up in the air, and it was hilarious, and I am the only one in that class who started laughing. So, comedy gold, but timing's really important, as is context.
Yes.
But then I guess you have some people like me who will recognize something's hilarious even when it is wildly inappropriate.
Well, I think sometimes comedy itself is a little individualized. I am the largest comedy snob you probably know, and you didn't know it until I've said it here.
Oh my gosh, you're such a comedy snob.
I am a comedy snob. For example, I am so extremely picky on comedy that I will refuse to go see most comedy movies. The only movie I have ever walked out of was a romantic comedy, Tin Cup. That was in the 1990s.
Bad golfing movie. With
Very bad golfing movie.
And Rene Russo.
You've convinced me not to see it.
Yeah. And where I'm going with this is, for example, as bad as I am, Steve Martin. A lot of people consider Steve Martin to be absolutely hilarious.
I do.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Fisticuffs.
No,
As an
every
actor,
fucking time.
as an actor, I've got 2 levels with Steve Martin. So bear with me for a second. As a comedian, any of his comic movies, I cannot stand at all. Not a chance. Makes me want to retch. However, every single serious role he has done, I've got, oh my God, this man deserves an Oscar. I mean, it's just that much of a difference. And I've noticed also, too, FYI, a lot of comedians make fantastic serious actors.
I've also noticed you're very picky on what.
Oops, I just dropped the mouse. Okay, moving on.
You're very picky about what musicals you like, and maybe
Oh,
that's
that's even
also
worse.
because again, pick your own comedies. So most musicals are supposed to have a lot of funny moments, and a lot of things he just doesn't find funny.
That's true.
Yeah.
But but actually, I'm glad you actually opened the door for me. Thank you
Uh-huh.
for this next thing, which is from Mark Twain. He said, "The funniest things are the forbidden." I think sometimes we have a tendency to laugh at ourselves and other things because it is forbidden, or generally a taboo. Go ahead.
I don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about that?
There are some things, there are some jokes that are hilarious because you're kind of like, I can't believe they just said that.
Exactly.
Like, oh, that's so funny, and I'm a horrible person for laughing, but that was great though.
I think that's just shock, though. That's not humor.
I don't know.
No,
Like,
that's different.
It's different.
There are some shock is different. Like there's a shock because people don't usually talk about certain things. Like I will laugh so hard at a period joke. People don't generally make those, but Margaret Cho talks in one of her stand-up comedy shows about periods, and it's hilarious. And it's something you don't usually discuss in polite company because dudes are squeamish and women are, told not to do that.
It's funny, when you said period jokes, I thought you meant
No.
historical periods.
No,
Well, there
although
are those two.
that's a
anyway.
different kind of thing.
You
But,
sweet summer child down there.
oh goodness. But she goes into kind of periods and the humor in the situation and what it would be like if guys had periods, and then because she is very much entrenched in gay culture, if gay guys had periods, and the joke spiraled out from there, and it was fabulous and hilarious. But initially, the shock value was incredible because wow, she's talking about this, and this is something half the population deals with, but it's kind of taboo.
Another good example, and this is, you can find this in mysteries where the mystery writer has done a lot of work with cops. We think of murder as something extremely serious, and it is. Don't get me wrong. You've got a homicide that's happened. But how many times, and this is also true in real life, how many times do the cops who are there in the darkness need to have a little relief and start doing a lot of dark humor? And they get a joke going. And of course, problem is if family is nearby, God help you, because they're all going to go set off. But a lot of times in good mysteries, you'll have a touch of humor. Not a lot of humor around that dark moment, but a touch. And that's something I consider to be taboo technically, but I absolutely love.
Yeah, but macabre humor is a way of dealing with it.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a coping mechanism. Humor is often a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Hold on, let it finish.
Yeah, related to that, medical students have the same thing, so much so that there's a little lecture before medical students are given their cadavers now to really reinforce treat the cadavers with respect. Because especially historically, not so much today because it's much more regulated today, but there were all sorts of jokes in the early days of medical school. By early days, I mean 19th century, although I'm sure they extended further, into the 50s and even more recently, for med students doing all sorts of inappropriate things with bodies donated to science.
But Brad's right, macabre humor really can be a release of a very dark moment, and be it in a mystery or in a horror story or whatever, as well as real life. Brad, did you have any more before I give us to Fedora? Okay.
I keep going back to things that other people have done already, and so I'm now going back to something that David said earlier, which was about wordplay. One of the lowest forms of wit, and also very funny always, is the pun, which is a basic form of wordplay. But wordplay can often be very humorous anyway, and that doesn't mean that it has to be devoid of meaning even. Try this one from Phyllis Diller. A smile is a curve that sets everything straight.
That's so corny.
It's corny, but it's cute. And of course the wordplay is on curved and straight.
And a little fast wordplay as well from our author for today, Mark Twain. Reader, suppose you're an idiot. And suppose you're a member of Congress. I repeat myself. See, Bing, love him. Go ahead.
Can we talk about 1 to 3 line comedy zingers versus storytelling? Because we've been mentioning a few really short wordplay jokes, and I was thinking about Mitch Hedberg, famous stoner comedian. Unfortunately, he's died.
So glad I got to see him live.
Oh, I'm so jealous right now. So anyway, his jokes were 1 to 3 lines.
Yep.
And they didn't necessarily relate to one another. And when I first heard audio of him, but it was being filmed. He made jokes about that. When I first heard his comedy, it kind of stacked. Like, at first it was like, it's funny. And then after a couple minutes, I would start laughing. And then after a little while, it was like cumulatively the comedy snuck up on me and then just pounced. So that humor is very different from someone like Gabriel Iglesias, who in his fluffy stand-up comedy show is great. He tells an entire story that's probably 10 minutes long about him and his friends getting pulled over by a police officer, and there's so many jokes in it, but the entire thing stacks and builds and builds and builds into this great punchline.
Now, you're kind of touching on 2 different things, which is, one is, like, as we were talking earlier about Bob Hope, Phyllis Diller, God, all the comedy legends, they had lines. Zingers is what they were commonly referred to, in that it is a single joke that encapsulates itself and it's meant to be told without anything around it. You can sting them together, which is what Bob Hope would do for his comedy shows, or Phyllis Diller would do, or any number of people would do. And then you would get a huge thing. Now, the other thing about comedy that when you do that is bringing it back around. So you always want to bring it back around to the first joke. And that's where you then end, and it's building, and it's the same way we do it with writing. The other one is the story, which I am fascinated by, because you're laying out a humorous story. It can be, as you said, 10 plus minutes long or something like that. And not only are there jokes within, and all of those jokes relate and push forward the story, but then the entire thing in itself has the giant climactic joke that was the whole point of the story in the first place.
I think Mark Twain did that much more.
Okay, we've got dovetails and dovetails. So
I was just going to give a good example of a zinger. If anybody who remembers The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, he had a portion of his monologue that was just zingers, and it was cued by the band hitting a big note, and then he'd lay a zinger, and then he'd hit another one, and then they'd lay another zinger, and that's each of those zinger jokes. They were each funny on their own right, and maybe they were all about politics or something, but they had nothing to do with each other, really, unless they were all borrowing the same word or something just for fun. But all of them could be independent, which it was part of his big monologue that had all different kinds of jokes in it. So there you go, example of a zinger.
Brad had mentioned things coming full circle, and I just wanted to say that that's something, it reminded me of something I heard in Folding Ideas, the YouTube show, about specifically about editing and story editing and how you remind the audience of things. And something that I think is common to jokes and also, how you structure a movie or a story is you have the setup, you have the punchline, and then if you're a comedian, you make a callback to that joke somewhere in the middle of your show, and then you bring it back at the end of the show as well, and that kind of gives the feeling of closure and things coming full circle.
It's the encapsulation of a set is usually what it's
referenced. Since Kathleen was so kind to mention the late great Mitch Hedberg, you really can't mention Mitch without mentioning his rhythm that he had with telling the jokes that he would tell. He had like this very kind of laid back, almost like a stoner kind of rhythm that he would tell to all of his jokes, which really made him stand out and really just kind of it made each joke just even better. Like one of my all-time favorite lines that he did was when he said, "I love escalators because escalators can never be broken. They can only become stairs." Sorry, folks, escalator temporarily broken. Sorry, folks, escalator temporarily stairs. Sorry for the convenience. Just the way that he would tell it, it was just so like kind of laid back. It was literally as if he was just coming up with something after taking a really big drag on a joint. And that's just the kind of thing that made it work for him. And that's something that all the great comics that are out there, they all had their own rhythm. They were all able to attack the audience basically like with the way that they told their jokes, and each one of them with that kind of style and everything worked really well for them.
And then
I think we've been talking about various sources of humor. That is, use of words and wordplay, humorous ideas, humorous juxtaposition of ideas, and timing. Another means of creating humor is in the situation. That's the whole notion of all situation comedies. That the situation in itself is rather absurd, like The Modern Family, for example, or The Big Bang, when we have people who are amazingly intelligent and can do wonderful things, but are complete social misfits and they're trying to fit in. So it's the comedy of situation also. Like Janet Ivanovich, who keeps writing the same book over and over again, but they keep selling millions because they're funny. She explores and plumbs the situation time after time and minds it every time.
I heard what you did, ma'am. You said plums.
Man, no.
Sorry. Can you explain why that was amusing to me?
Well, Stephanie Plum is her name.
That was called a pun.
A pun.
One of
Yes.
the things about situational and story comedy, I think, can be explained easily once again by Mark Twain in this statement. Soap and education are not as sudden as a massacre, but they are more deadly in the long run.
You were next, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm going to deviate a bit.
I was going to deviate as well. You deviate first.
All right. Well,
You deviant.
yes,
You know,
I
we're all
am a
deviants.
deviant.
Blaha.
Oh, goodness. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about banter, because we've talked about comedy that's done by one person, but there is something amazing about, like, funny banter, about, like, someone being witty in conversation, or someone just sassing the hell out of someone else. That is wonderful to me, and I think, like, older films are great with that.
Let's employ the proper terms.
Mm-hmm.
Salt,
And shade.
getting salty, and getting shady.
And reading.
Salt, shade, and reading people.
Yes.
Since you brought up RuPaul's Drag Race, you might as well go all the way. Read them like a library.
When you read someone, you're basically giving a rundown of how much they suck,
Yes.
but in a funny way.
Not necessarily, but I digress.
No. Please,
She's
speak.
not
No,
it's always in a funny way. Kind of.
it's not always in a funny way.
All
but
right.
it's just
In the
like,
context that I'm familiar from RuPaul's Drag Race, if you're not funny, well, it's not as good.
I would give you. It is better to be funny.
Yes.
it is
You're
better to
right.
be funny,
But-
but
Mhm. But you don't have to be.
you don't have
You
to.
can just be shady.
Mm-hmm.
However, banter. Let's throw it down. That's Spider-Man. That's like all
Yes.
encapsulating Spider-Man's territory. Deadpool's territory.
That's why they
You know.
play off each other so well.
This is true.
Yes.
That's why Deadpool actively seeks Spider-Man out to mess with him.
Yes. So if you're looking for good banter, there's your comic book equivalent.
Anytime Tony Stark talks to someone else when he's played by Robert Downey Jr.,
There's banter.
sass.
Oh, yes.
Banter.
Well, banter is
Especially with Chris.
banter is teen comedy,
Yeah.
Yes.
and often it involves the wisecracker and the straight man. You know.
What does that mean, Jen?
Well, the straight man is the person who is often the butt of the joke, but mostly they are the stand-in for. I'm not explaining this very well. Bert and Ernie.
Mm-hmm.
Bert is the straight man, and Ernie's the jokester, because Ernie's the one who delivers the punchline and laughs, and Bert's the one who rolls his eyes and looks at the camera.
Mm.
And it's that combination, I made a funny joke and I think I'm hilarious, versus the other guy who is, you made a joke and that was a really bad joke. That's showing different members of the audience, that's showing two different personalities clashing with each other, two different points of view meeting, and that's what makes this situational banter comedy.
You mean kind of an odd couple?
Very much. The Odd Couple is all about banter too.
Yes. Abbott and Costello.
Basically,
Oscar,
like
Oscar.
the the best way that I can think to kind of build on that sort of dynamic is basically you just take like two people, put them right next to each other, and the one on the right just looks at the one on the left and just starts poking them
Yeah.
right on the shoulder. Basically, just doing whatever he can to try to get a rise out of the other person.
Reaction is very important.
And that's where you have like a lot of team ups that you've seen like in different movies. My personal favorite, Martin Riggs and Roger Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon. and you have, because Riggs is very much a wild card in the sense, he is a damaged person, but at the same time he is able to find a way to kind of get through the day and everything just by playing off of the impatience of Roger Murtaugh. He is, as Danny Glover played him. He was a cop that was very. He's always very close to retirement. By the third one, it was finally like the day that it was going to happen, and then he decided at the very last minute that he wasn't going to. And thankfully, he did, because we were able to get one more movie out of him, which was the one with Jet Li. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Jet Li should have won.
The straight man comedian combo. Let's boil it down to even just the bubbling surface. Every ventriloquist act.
Yep.
Yes.
It's one guy.
Yeah.
It's comedy standard.
He's just there, and it's the personality that he brings out of the box. I mean, the ventriloquist is always, most of the time, he's a straight man. I mean, Charlie McCarthy was pretty straight. Well, straight.
Well, if you get, I don't know, Otto and George, they were very much like the very like the rawest definition of a ventriloquist, because George, the puppet, was always mouthing off and everything, and Otto was trying to be the straight man, which, their dynamic was fantastic. Another comedy act who unfortunately has left us, but even
the latest, Dunham.
Jeff Dunham and Peanut,
Yeah, I mean, the ventriloquist is always the one that's going to be cracking the joke, and the guy behind him is always going to be the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just like comedy 101, basically. That's what we're talking about here. The comedy duo works because you have that ability to bounce off each other. And the reason that dynamic works is because it's not just the one lone comic standing up there. The minute you put two guys up there, now suddenly you got
there's
the
an
ability
energy.
to fire.
Yeah.
There's an energy, but there's also the ability to tell more than just the zinger or the story. Now I can fire back and forth in a conversation, turn that into something. It's like it's just another avenue of comedy, but comedy's now to a point where it's almost so fixed that we have definite roads that you are walking down. You're walking down the lone zinger, you're walking down the comedy duo, you're walking down, tall guy, and the tiny guy, or the big fat guy and the skinny guy. These are all like comedy tropes that we have just kind of accepted and are now kind of ingrained. So kind of striking out a new comedy is actually pretty hard.
Thank you for bringing up comedy tropes. One of my favorite is the buddy cop trope that you see. That is another kind of odd couple type of comedy. And I think that kind of character dynamic, that kind of relationship is something you can bring into any piece of writing. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the comedy. I have some characters in a novel that I'm writing that's totally not actually a novel, because that's scary to me, who don't get along, and they're really snarky at one another, and their sense of humor is similar, but they hate each other, and that's something that brings humor to the piece, even as you learn about each of the characters based on kind of what they're saying in response to one another.
I'm gonna change topic a little bit again, so if anyone...
I was gonna jump on another trope real quick.
It.
So the fat guy, skinny guy, or now is the fat guy, hot guy. The tropes shifted a bit now that we have Channing Tatum.
I'm okay with
in.
that.
But it amuses me, and I find it interesting, and I don't know why it is. I mean, for some reason, I understand that humor is a coping mechanism. People who are of large size in Hollywood really tend to gravitate towards humor. I don't know if they're pigeonholed or what. Why we have this kind of back and forth. So, but it's an odd trope, it's an interesting trope, but it's, at this point now, it's, 50, 60 something years old, or older. I mean, we're going back to Bugs Bunny, and before that with Abbott Costello, before that.
My favorite.
So, it's even older than 60 years, jeez. Anyway.
I'm sure there was a tall, skinny caveman and a short, fat caveman, and they were never seen apart.
Exactly. So I don't know quite what that is, but it's, it's another trope.
They will still work, though, and that's the beauty of the thing. But you have to make a little bit of a change with it. So we come up now with Penn and Teller, who add magic to it, and pain, as you can say. But they add something new to it, and you can take, I think, any old trope. add something new to it, and it will still work because it's still fundamental to the human psyche.
That's why I think skinny guy became hot guy. Changed the trope up.
All right. I wanted to take us a little bit back to Mark Twain and to another topic that I really wanted to reach out in this episode, which is the idea of humor in the form of parody and satire, which is even more dicey nowadays. It's always a dicey thing. You have to do it right, or else it's very, very, very not funny. As opposed to just a joke falling flat. When you're making a joke that is making a commentary on the world around you, often you might be misinterpreted if you don't land that joke well, and often when you do land that joke well, because that's in the news a lot whenever you're looking at all at pop culture articles or whatever. Someone said this thing, and now we should all hate them or shun them or whatever. And often it's because they were trying to tell a joke and it didn't work. I have an example. I'm dating and also nerding myself. Those of you who spend your time on YouTube, like I do, there's one of the original Let's Players who's very, very popular, and he had a contract with Maker.com, I think, and his name was PewDiePie. PewDiePie is a Swedish man who makes videos for the internet for a living, and he's very rich because of it. He's got millions and millions of subscribers, and he was trying to make recently, here in early 2017, was trying to make a joke about Fiverr, the website where you can pay $5 and get people to do anything. And it's...
Didn't they make a movie about that?
I don't... not in terms of this story.
Okay.
But he was trying to make a parody of just how desperate people are on Fiverr by paying people on Fiverr to do horrible things. And the horrible thing he decided to do was he got two young men who were desperately poor in India to hold up a sign and dance wearing like tribal garb. And the sign said "Death to Jews" or something. And then he got another guy who calls himself YouTube Jesus, I believe. Both of these people, don't hate on them for this. Also, even don't go hate on PewDiePie for this. But he got a guy who looks like Jesus, who says that he'll say anything into the microphone for $1 or for $5. He got him to say Hitler did nothing wrong, and put these on his website, on his YouTube channel. And the idea was to prove that people will do anything for $5. But is that what you guys got out of that? No. Is that what our audience got out of that? Probably not. No, they got the message that he was sending, and the reason why, and this is why I want to bring it up, I have done a lot of sort of surface research just by listening to people breaking the scenario down on YouTube. Because it was a big deal. He lost his contract with Disney. His second show Scared PewDiePie, was going into its second season, and the show was dropped and canceled. So all the work that they'd already done was all gone, and he lost a lot of subscribers. And he had to put out a bunch of apology videos. And New York and the Washington Post, I forget which major newspaper broke the story, and it became international news. And we can go into a whole different topic about that, because apparently there was some not good stuff that everybody did in the breaking of that story. But the point was that the reason why his jokes didn't make it, he was trying to make a joke about how Fiverr is taking advantage of people and that they'll do anything for money, but he did so by
taking advantage of people.
By attacking a group that was already being vulnerable. Now, if he had them dance around holding posters, he's got another YouTuber, I don't know, I actually don't watch PewDiePie. He's got another YouTuber that he likes to take pot shots at as a friend of his. So if ever something bad happens, he takes a pot shot at him. If he'd had a sign where they were dancing around saying, other YouTubers a poo-poo head, that would have been funny. Because that's a stupid sign. You're making fun of somebody, but you're not making fun of a group of people that has already experienced a lot of hurt and is currently experiencing a lot of hurt because, we live in St. Louis, and just recently a Jewish cemetery was vandalized out of a hate crime. Like that was the wrong group of people to attack, and it was intended to be satire and parody. and it didn't land in like the most epic didn't land kind of way.
Yeah.
So with that scenario in mind, what sort of advice do you give to our readers or to our listeners about doing satire and parody correctly when you're trying to make a commentary on the world around you?
That sounds like you need to know your audience and be aware of the connotations of whatever it is you're doing, not just what you intend, because author intent and what the readers pick up are going to be different, and it's something that you need to try and get ahead of as much as possible, but it's not always possible. I wanted to take it, the idea of satire and parody, and talk about one of my favorite short stories in the world. It's called The Parable of the Shower by Leah Bobbitt, and it's amazing. Unfortunately, I've met one person who I have shared this story with who did not get the humor, and that's something you need to be aware of with satire and parody, because not everyone is going to think it is funny for the same reason that, it's done. So, for those of you familiar with the Bible, old school thee, thou translations, okay. For those of you familiar with the whole Immaculate Conception concept, okay. This story deals with both, and I'm going to read you the first paragraph. The angel of the Lord, and Lord is all capitalized, as it would be in those Bible translations. The angel of the Lord cometh upon you in the shower at the worst possible moment, one hand placed upon thy right buttock, and the other bearing soap, radio blaring, humming a heathen song of sin. It's beautiful. I want to read more. It's just... So, the entire language of the piece is in that biblical style, and it deals with things of a biblical nature, but it's completely a modern short story. And the main character is not at all like Mary. When the angel comes to her and is like, I need to get you pregnant, she's like, I'm a lesbian? Nuh-uh. I need to speak to your manager. And it's beautiful. Oh my goodness, I love this story so much.
Brad, you're not? Okay.
Just really quickly to play off of what Jen was talking about before, and how such a big part of comedy writing and everything is to know your audience. One of the real tragedies of comedy that I had seen in a good long time was when Fox News decided that they were going to try their hand at doing a Daily Show type of show called the Half-Hour News Hour. And the problem is that it just flat out wasn't funny. Because you have a conservative media that are taking pot shots at the other side, when and even just like as someone who is on the left side of the spectrum, even if I wasn't, I still would not get the kind of jokes that they were doing. And it played off as very kind of like a desperate type of humor, where you just couldn't really see any sort of real humor in what they were doing. And it was just basically just came off as cruel, to a point where, they didn't even have an actual audience, an actual studio audience there laughing, finding anything funny. You could hear like some chuckles coming from the production guys. That was pretty much it. And it's no surprise that the show did not last very long.
What kind of jokes were they trying to make fun of?
It just seemed like they were just very...
Were they mad at the Daily Show?
They tried to do a Daily Show kind of...
but not funny.
Yeah.
Okay, Fedora, then...
To answer Jen's question earlier about what group you can make fun of, I think you have to go the Monty Python way, which is to make fun of a group that nobody would admit to belonging to. They use, for example, upper class British twit. And nobody's going to admit to belonging to that, so it's okay to make fun of them. But I like to take it back also to Mark Twain and his use of satire, and why I think Huckleberry Finn is the great American novel. Not only is it an adventure story of a boy getting away from his abusive father, going down the river and having adventures, and you can read it strictly as an adventure story. You can read it as social satire against child abuse, against war, against prejudice, against all kinds of horrible things in our society, and you can read it in a very gentle way, brought in carefully. And you can finally read it as a life story, kind of an allegory of traveling down the river of life. You can read it on many levels, and that's why it's so beautiful. Not only because it's an adventure story, it's also social satire and a story of life.
This is directly towards that, I have to say. You left out one of the biggest ways you can read Huckleberry Finn in historical context. It tricked a lot of white people into seeing a black man as a human being.
Which was the social satire.
Right.
Yeah.
Social satire.
But I think modern audience, that's not quite so obvious.
True.
Well, that in that way, it kind of performed a social service, I would think.
Absolutely.
Humanizing a group of people that had been demonized by another and using, characterization and some amount of comedy in this situation to allow people to identify with this person they wouldn't previously have identified with. And on the note of, tackling social issues, tackling issues that, are part of the modern conversation, I want to bring up Dave Barry. He is my favorite humor writer in this world. I love his writing. He has a piece about telling men to get colonoscopies. When you turn 50, get a colonoscopy. And the piece he writes is hilarious. And it basically walks you through the entire process. And you get to go through the colonoscopy with Dave Barry, but he's being so funny, you're not upset by it. And you realize, okay, at the end of this, that's actually not that bad. I could handle that. I could, be healthy for my family. And the way he does it is to make you laugh. But the article went viral. It's on the internet. I pulled it up really easily. You can search Dave Barry colonoscopy and you'll find it, and you will laugh so hard. So I think comedy can be used for things like that too, like social justice and, PSA. Mm-hmm. You need to be healthy. It's not that hard. It's not scary. Let me tell you why.
It's easier to face scary topics when you're smiling.
And remember, that's not David Allen Lucas in colonoscopy. That's Dave Barry in colonoscopy. Sorry.
Do you have colonoscopy
You have a
photos?
colonoscopy video out there?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Damn.
I
Otherwise, that was going up
so
on
excited.
Well.
St. Louis Writers Guild on Facebook. That's coming. Okay, so to kind of jump on what Kathleen just said there, I actually think that comedy is the greatest way you can talk about social issues. Mm-hmm. Some of my favorite comedians, Richard Pryor, even Eddie Murphy in his heyday, before he started making all those crazy movies. Not only Chris Rock, these people are insanely funny, but what they were talking about were issues. Now, yeah, some of it's, just Eddie Murphy standing there swinging his microphone like it's a giant penis. But others of it are direct social commentary that strikes directly into something you want to hear about and don't necessarily know about. One of the reasons why I have literally never done cocaine is because of Robin Williams' bit on cocaine. Like, his bit about being on cocaine, which is off one of his comedy albums, and I listened to it when I was way too young, and it was hilarious. I mean, it's either going to make you want to do cocaine because you want to be that wild and crazy and up here all the time, or you're going to be like me and you're going to be like, oh my god, my heart's going to explode if I even look like that. So I think comedy is something that affects us on more levels than just, and it's laughter. Laughter affects us on more levels than just an outward expression of ourselves. But more importantly, there is a reason after 9/11 it took Saturday Night Live to get this country back out of the craziness that had happened. Because Saturday Night Live was a comedy show. And they were in New York. They were right there. They were in the thick of it. They all experienced something. And the ability for them to be able to say, let's laugh tonight. Just set it all off. And that's something comedy can do that no other force has. And there's a great quote by Mark Twain that totally talks about that.
I just wanted to, it just reminded me, this conversation, about a radio show that I used to listen to with my mom on the way to school every morning. And there was a comedian on that show. His name was J. Anthony Brown. And I can't remember exactly what the topic was, but they were Some comedian had caught a lot of flack about broaching a very sensitive subject in a way that people thought was incredibly inappropriate. And they thought, oh, you shouldn't be cracking jokes about this. You shouldn't be cracking jokes about this. But J. Anthony Brown said, no, the thing about comedy is there's nothing off limits. You have to be able to bring that to your audience. You have to be able to broach those tough subjects in a way that is funny. That is part of what comedy does.
I think I might know which topic was brought up. It might have been the bit that Gilbert Gottfried was tweeting about. I think it was like the tsunami.
Oh, that was the one that got him off.
That got him off of Aflac, yeah, because that might have been that because that spurred a whole like a really big conversation about exactly what you were talking about, about like what you can and can't joke about. And just to really quickly dovetail from what Brad was talking about, I remember the opening of that particular Saturday Night Live episode very, very vividly when Rudy Giuliani, his pre-Nosferatu days, when he actually looked, sounded, and cared like a decent human being, stood next to Lorne Michaels, and Lorne looked at him and said just flat out, "Can we be funny?" And Rudy's response is, "Why start now?" And it was just a wonderful little moment that really got things back on track. So yeah, humor can really do a lot.
Yeah, they were really nervous about that episode.
Yes.
Understandable. And final thoughts?
This is from Mark Twain, and it is not funny at all, but I wanted to prove that Mark Twain also was just a damn good writer. Listen to this for economy and impact and really getting to a visualization of one thing. It's from Roughing It. He went out west and was penniless. He was totally broke. Mm-hmm. During all this time, I had but one piece of money, a silver 10-cent piece, and I held to it and would not spend it on any account, lest the consciousness coming strong upon me that I was entirely penniless might suggest suicide. I had pawned everything but the clothes I had on, so I clung to my dime desperately, till it was smooth with handling.
And on that note, have a great week writing. Tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. Thank you.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information.
The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.